Why do dishonest people seem to flourish while the honest struggle? It's simple. Most people are inherently good and truthful, which makes them easy targets for those who lie without conscience. I learned this brutal lesson the hard way from Sophia DeLuca, now Sophia DeLuca Carter. I'm James Carter, her ex-husband. It all started one day when my Lexus developed engine trouble. Victor, my trusted mechanic for over a decade, asked me to step into a private office at Marshall Motors. His expression was unusually serious. "James, the engine's fine. Just a loose belt," he began, but his tone darkened. "There's an issue with the brake line. Someone tampered with it." I was taken aback. Victor explained that while there was enough brake fluid for regular stops, any sudden braking or a steep descent could have spelled disaster. The revelation hit me hard. Just 6 months earlier, Sophia and I had moved into a sleek suburban home nestled in quiet woods, at the bottom of a steep cul-de-sac. If I had driven home unaware, the outcome could have been catastrophic. "Can you keep this quiet for now? Have you fixed it?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. "Not yet," Victor replied gravely. "This is serious, James. We need to call the police." "Let's hold off," I suggested, thinking quickly. "Take photos and document everything. For now, leave the car in the backyard. I'll rent one of your older vehicles for a few days. There are security cameras, right?" Victor hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, there are." I suspected that whoever tampered with the brakes might try to cover their tracks if they realized I was still alive. Security footage could be our trump card when we eventually involved the authorities. After leaving a rented blue Corolla in my driveway, I took the day off to process what had happened. The attempt on my life had to be about money. As the president of Apex, a $6.8 billion software company, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was part of a larger scheme targeting the company. The house was eerily quiet, with Rosa, our cook and housekeeper, away for the day. I spent the afternoon thinking through potential suspects and motives. To cover all bases, I called Liam Foster, head of the security firm Apex relied on, and arranged for a discreet audit of our systems and finances. I gave him a temporary password and instructed Emily, my secretary, to assist with the firm's visit. While preparations were underway, I decided to poke around for anything suspicious. I didn't expect to find much on our home computer, but curiosity got the better of me. I tried accessing Sophia's files, including her email, only to find them all password protected. It struck me as odd. What could she possibly be hiding? My mind wandered to innocent explanations. A surprise party, maybe? But I resolved to bring it up with her later. Around 4:30, as I was sipping tea in the kitchen, Sophia walked in. Her reaction startled me. She froze in the doorway, her face drained of color, her jaw hanging open. "James, why are you here?" she stammered. I reminded her, a little too gently, that I lived there. She recovered quickly, joining me at the table. "I wasn't expecting you so early. I didn't see the Lexus outside." For a moment, I considered telling her about the brake line but decided against it. Instead, I casually mentioned an engine problem and explained that I'd left the car at Victor's shop, renting a replacement for the time being. At first, I convinced myself that I didn't want to worry her. But the truth was, something about her reaction unsettled me. It felt off. That image of her pale, shocked face stuck in my mind. Sophia suggested dinner plans and excused herself to shower. As I heard the water running, I decided to freshen up for the evening. Walking past our bedroom, I heard her voice, low and urgent. She was on the phone. Why was she making calls from the shower? Intrigued, I paused. She was speaking to someone she called Fozzie, a nickname I'd used for Liam Foster since middle school. Sophia had picked it up from me, so there was no mistaking who she was talking to. When she hung up and returned to the bathroom, I stood there, stunned. What could Sophia and Liam have to talk about that required such secrecy? Was there any connection between her, Liam, and the tampered brakes? The thought seemed ludicrous. Sophia and I had been married for 8 years. I was 46, and she was 37. This wasn't my first marriage. My first, at 20, had produced 2 kids who now lived far away. I met Sophia during a tour of Apex offices, and her striking beauty immediately caught my attention. Nearly 6 feet tall, with jet black hair and piercing dark eyes, she exuded confidence. I'd orchestrated a lunch date through a mutual friend, which went surprisingly well. Despite our age difference and my average appearance, I knew my success had something to do with her interest, and I was okay with that. A solid prenup ensured fairness if things didn't work out, and for the most part, our relationship brought me happiness. Yes, she had expensive tastes and a flirtatious streak, but those quirks never seemed threatening, until now. Dinner that evening was pleasant enough, though I masked my growing anxiety. Later, as expected, our night ended in passionate lovemaking. But by the next morning, I'd made up my mind. I woke early, packed a bag, and booked a flight to Los Angeles for an impromptu business trip. Before heading out, I roused Sophia to let her know about my sudden plans and left her with a kiss. "Sorry to wake you, babe," I said with a soft smile as Sophia blinked awake, a drowsy grin spreading across her face. "Morning, James. What's going on?" she murmured. "I need to catch a sudden flight to LA for a business meeting," I replied. The excuse wasn't true, but given my frequent travel, it sounded perfectly reasonable. She stretched and smiled knowingly. "All right, honey. I'll keep the bed warm for you. Will you be back by Friday?" "That's the plan," I said, my voice light. "Just you and me when I get back." She chuckled and hugged me tightly, her warmth comforting. For a moment, her affection felt genuine, but as the limo carried me away, doubts began to creep back in. Could Sophia really be involved in the brake line sabotage? Her ease with deception made it hard to tell. I wanted to believe she was innocent, but the lingering possibility that she was a skilled manipulator gnawed at me. During the short flight to Los Angeles, I refined my plan, knowing I had to act discreetly. With Liam Foster's potential involvement, I couldn't rely on anyone local. I needed fresh eyes, someone unconnected to my usual network. Upon landing, I bought a prepaid cell phone to stay anonymous and checked into the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. From there, I set up a lunch meeting with Ethan Blake, my former right-hand man and one of the few people I still trusted. Ethan had moved to LA years ago, but we'd stayed in touch, meeting occasionally to catch up. Over lunch at a downtown cafe, we reminisced for a while before I shifted the conversation. "Ethan," I said, leaning forward, "I need a couple of favors." His brows lifted, and I continued. "Something's not right at Apex, potential security issues. Do you know any firms you trust?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Vertex Securities. Benjamin Scott runs it. Top-notch guy," he said. Then he paused. "But what about Liam Foster?" "I need someone from outside my usual circle," I explained. "Call Scott, but don't mention my name." Ethan nodded and made the call right there, arranging a meeting with Scott. Once that was handled, I decided to ask something more personal. "Ethan, has Sophia ever done anything suspicious around you?" His face flushed slightly, and he hesitated before admitting, "Before I moved, she flirted with me a few times." I didn't want to say anything. I wasn't sure how you'd take it. I stayed calm, waving off his concern. "I get it, Ethan. I'm not mad at you. You ignored it, and eventually, she stopped, right?" "Exactly," he confirmed. "It felt like she was testing me, though. It only lasted a few weeks." "Was there anything else? Any other strange behavior?" I pressed. Ethan nodded reluctantly. "Actually, yes. When we moved, Olivia heard from Grace Taylor that Ryan, your CFO, was probably cheating with Sophia. That caught my attention." "How did Grace find out?" Ethan shrugged. "Ryan's behavior seemed off, and Grace noticed Sophia's perfume on him a few times. Olivia and I debated whether to tell you, but figured it wasn't our place." Though his revelation stung, I couldn't blame him for staying quiet. If anything, his honesty reinforced my growing suspicion that Sophia might be part of a scheme, one that could threaten both me and Apex. After our conversation, I contacted Benjamin Scott. Our call was brief and professional. I explained that I needed a top-tier security firm for a confidential matter and emphasized that I wanted someone completely unconnected to me or my associates. Scott recommended Samuel Hayes in San Diego, praising his intelligence and the skill of his team. At my request, Scott arranged a meeting with Hayes for the next morning, keeping my identity under wraps. Back at the hotel, I called Ethan again, asking him to rent a car from Hertz for me, ensuring it wouldn't be traceable. After a quick dinner, I had my usual late-night chat with Sophia, her voice cheerful and affectionate as always. Despite my suspicions, I kept the conversation light before heading to bed. The next morning, I donned a low-key disguise, sweatpants, sunglasses, and a baseball cap, and made my way to the Hertz office near LAX. By 9:45, I was in San Diego, parking near Hayes' office. Despite his unassuming appearance, Hayes' intelligence became evident within minutes. Cutting to the chase, I laid out my needs. I require a high-level security firm for an extremely confidential and complex matter, I explained. The task involves extensive computer work and absolute discretion. I'm willing to pay generously, covering all costs. He studied me carefully before asking, "Why come to us? What makes you think we're the right fit?" "Benjamin Scott spoke highly of you," I replied. "So why not use Scott?" he pressed. "Because I need to keep this off the radar," I said firmly. "Once you understand what's at stake, you'll see why. Scott contacted you without revealing my identity for a reason. It needs to stay that way." Hayes nodded, seeming to appreciate the caution. "Tell me everything," he said. "If it aligns with what we can do, we're in." I laid it all out: my identity, the scope of Apex's operations, and the break-line sabotage that I suspected was an attempt on my life. I shared my concerns about Sophia and Foster, along with Ethan Blake's observations, though I left Ethan's name out of it. Hayes listened intently, his questions sharp and insightful. "I'm familiar with Liam Foster," he remarked thoughtfully. "If he's involved, we'll tread carefully." After discussing logistics, Hayes outlined the first steps. "You'll need two things," he began. Hayes laid out the plan succinctly. "We need a two-pronged approach," he began. "First, an in-depth analysis of your documents and Apex's financials. Second, surveillance of your wife, Foster, and key Apex executives. Lucas Meyer, my top computer expert, will handle the financial side. Amelia Brooks will lead the surveillance team." About half an hour later, we gathered in a conference room, sharing takeout sandwiches as we hashed out the details of the operation. Hayes, though clearly in charge, allowed Meyer and Brooks to take the lead in the discussion. His occasional interjections, filled with sharp wit and strategic insight, reassured me that I was in capable hands. By mid-afternoon, I headed back to Los Angeles with a sense of relief. Hayes had agreed to work on a promissory note, sparing me from an immediate financial burden. Meyer explained the technical aspect of his plan, which would start with accessing Apex's systems through my office computer. "You'll need to visit a secure URL on Hayes' website," Meyer instructed. "Do this only when you're alone in your office for at least 2 hours. Download the program I'll set up, and it'll allow me to remotely copy files from your computer and Apex's network. Before you leave the office, delete the program and clear your browser history. It's not perfect, but it should avoid detection unless your computer comes under heavy scrutiny." Meyer estimated it would take about 20 hours of digging through Apex's systems to uncover any financial irregularities. Meanwhile, Brooks's team would monitor Sophia and other key Apex executives. We agreed not to surveil Foster directly, as his security expertise made him likely to detect any such activity. Instead, Brooks proposed discrete methods, including phone and credit card tracking. "Foster's no amateur," I warned. "Any overt surveillance will be spotted immediately." Brooks nodded. "We'll handle this delicately. For Sophia, we can plant audio and video recording devices in the house, bug her purse, and tap her phone. We'll also do a sweep for any existing surveillance equipment to make sure we're not being watched." As for Sophia's personal phone, Brooks offered a clever plan. "She plays tennis regularly, right? I'll handle it while she's at the club locker room. Quick and clean." My role was to act as if nothing was amiss, business as usual at work and home. Hayes believed it might be some time before another attempt on my life, but he urged caution. "Avoid isolated areas, don't drive solo if possible, and have Sophia drive when you can," he advised. I promised to follow his recommendations, though his advice seemed deceptively simple. Before we parted ways, Hayes and I agreed on a secure communication system using disposable cell phones. I would call his office posing as a client, and the receptionist would redirect me to him under a pseudonym. We planned bi-daily check-ins to stay updated. Returning to the Beverly, Wilshire, I called Sophia to let her know I'd be back earlier than expected. Her voice sounded warm and excited. "I've missed you, James. I can't wait for Thursday night." After hanging up, I reflected on the woman I'd married. Despite her selfish tendencies, I believed she loved me in her own complicated way. Our marriage wasn't conventional. Affection was understated, and we found connection more in shared ambitions than romantic gestures. Yet, the mounting evidence hinted at something darker. Sophia might have been complicit in an attempt on my life, motivated by greed. Ethan Blake's revelations lingered in my mind. If true, Sophia had pursued Ethan, had an affair with Ryan Taylor, and possibly conspired with Foster. The thought was chilling, painting her as a manipulative, heartless figure. On the flight to San Jose, I turned over the possibilities in my head. If Sophia was deceiving me, I felt confident I could convincingly feign ignorance for as long as necessary. If my doubts proved unfounded, I'd gladly embrace her love again. But if she was truly involved, I had a plan for how I wanted things to play out. A part of me, darkly curious, almost looked forward to the truth. Our Thursday night reunion was striking for its ordinariness. Sophia was cheerful and relaxed, talking about her tennis match and shopping escapades without a hint of guilt or apprehension. The intimacy we shared that night felt genuine, but I couldn't shake the growing unease. The next morning, as I arrived at the office, Foster was already calling to announce his visit. His eagerness didn't surprise me. I suspected he wanted to probe into the audit I'd requested and gauge my intentions. When he walked in with a grin and extended his hand, I found myself wondering how he'd learned about my trip to LA. Had Sophia mentioned it? I decided against questioning him, not wanting to raise suspicions. Instead, I greeted him warmly and made an offhand comment about LA. "I met with an old friend, Ethan Blake, but the lead didn't pan out," I said casually. Foster seemed satisfied with the explanation. He sat across from me, presenting his findings. "The audit turned up nothing major, just a few minor accounting discrepancies," he reported. His tone was light, but his probing questions betrayed his curiosity. "What prompted this, James?" I had prepared for this moment. "Oh, it's probably nothing," I began. "But earlier this week, I got a call from Andrew Thornton at 2K2. He mentioned hearing rumors at a New York meeting about some kind of attack on a Silicon Valley firm. Something about fake subsidiaries funneling money. It sounded far-fetched, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to double-check." Foster relaxed, chuckling. "No problem, buddy. That's what we're here for." After he left, I wasted no time. Following Meyer's instructions, I accessed Hayes's website, downloaded the program, and set the wheels in motion for a full-scale examination of Apex's finances and communications. I decided to give Hayes's team plenty of time to work, so I opted to have lunch at my desk. Emily was kind enough to bring me a sandwich and the day's newspaper, which I hadn't yet had a chance to read. As I flipped through the metro section, a headline caught my attention: "Auto shop fire destroys 12 cars." Reading further, I discovered the fire had broken out at Marshall Motors, consuming a dozen vehicles and damaging others. Though it wasn't entirely unexpected given recent events, the news still unsettled me. I immediately called Victor, keeping my tone neutral in case someone was listening. "Victor, is everything okay?" "I just read about the fire," I said. "Yeah, everything's fine," he replied, but his voice carried a weight of frustration. "Your Lexus, it's gone, James. Completely destroyed." I let out a slow breath, keeping my response measured. "It's okay, Victor. That's what insurance is for. Can I swing by after work? Say, around 6 p.m.? We agreed on the time, and I ended the call. While I doubted the fire was random, I intended to have Hayes's team review the security footage Victor had mentioned. Thankfully, Victor had already documented the brake line tampering and taken photos. Whoever orchestrated the arson was both skilled and careful. When I arrived at Marshall Motors, Victor walked me through the scene. The charred remains of cars littered the lot as investigators combed the area. "They suspect foul play," Victor said quietly, "but proving it will be tough. They think it started with that old Ford next to your Lexus. Gas leak. Chain reaction. Boom." He gestured toward the wreckage. I pulled the surveillance footage. "It's in my office, hidden with the coffee filters." His resourcefulness impressed me. "Thanks, Dom," I said. "I need one more favor. Hold off on sending the footage and your report until Monday. I'll give you the address for Hayes' office. Repeat it back to me to make sure you've got it." After confirming he'd handle the matter discreetly, I left my rental car with Victor and decided to rely on cabs for a few days. Picking them up at random locations would reduce the likelihood of falling into another trap. Back at the hotel, I used my burner phone to contact Hayes. Myers' work was progressing, but the data extraction from my computer wasn't finished yet. Amelia Brooks's team, meanwhile, had swept my house for bugs and found none. They'd installed their own devices and managed to crack Sophia's computer password, copying her files for later analysis. I briefed Samuel on the car fire and promised to send the surveillance footage as soon as possible. We scheduled a follow-up call for early the next week. The weekend passed uneventfully. Sophia and I followed our usual routine, sleeping in on Saturday, a leisurely breakfast cooked by her, and an afternoon at the clubhouse. While I played golf, Sophia lounged by the pool with her friends. Dinner was a group affair at the club, followed by an intimate evening at home. Sunday was quieter. Sophia and I pursued separate activities, with me using work as an excuse to leave for part of the day. I alerted Samuel via my burner phone, and Amelia arranged for an operative to intercept Sophia's phone at the tennis club. Meanwhile, I initiated Myers' program from my office, giving him continued access to Apex's systems. Despite the betrayal I suspected, Sophia's flirtations with Ryan Taylor and potential ties to others, I found myself eerily calm. I recalled the old adage, "Revenge is a dish best served cold," attributed to Pierre-Ambroise François Coderlos de Laclos. For now, I compartmentalized my emotions and waited for concrete evidence. Sophia picked me up around 5:30, and we shared a quiet dinner at home, spending the rest of the evening watching episodes of The Sopranos. Monday passed without incident. At the office, I continued to play my part, giving Meyer the time he needed to complete his work. On Tuesday afternoon, I called Samuel from a discreet bar booth downtown. His update was sobering. "James, it's confirmed. Your car fire was arson," Samuel said. "Two masked men punctured the Ford's gas tank and spread gasoline before setting it ablaze." "Victor's evidence," I said. "Could that tie them to Foster or Sophia?" "It's possible," Samuel admitted, "but not enough on its own. We need more proof." He shifted to Myers' findings. "On your computer, we've uncovered what looks like a year-long embezzlement scheme. Around $2 million siphoned off. Lucas believes he can trace it to a specific office computer with more time. Can we recover the money?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Unlikely," Samuel replied. "You'd need to pursue legal action once we identify the culprit." Though the financial loss stung, it felt minor compared to an attempted homicide. Then Samuel's tone shifted. "James, about Sophia, things aren't looking good. I won't sugarcoat it." "What do you mean?" I asked, bracing myself. "She's likely connected to two of the three Apex guys you mentioned, Ryan Taylor and Derek Hughes. On Sunday, she called Foster from her phone. Their relationship is confirmed." "Jesus," I muttered, the weight of his words sinking in. Samuel didn't stop there. "We've also discovered credit cards under her maiden name. Did you know about those?" "Hell no," I replied, still processing the revelations. Samuel's voice softened. "I know this is tough, James. Give us a couple more days. Amelia's team is tracking her cell phone and purse bug, plus the bugs we installed at your house. We'll also dig deeper into her credit card activity." "All right," I said quietly, the cold edge of determination creeping into my voice. "Let me know as soon as you have more. Can you hang tight a little longer while we conclude our investigation?" "I know I have to, Samuel, so I'll manage," I replied, my tone steady despite the churn of unease inside me. "Do you think there's a risk of another attack?" After a brief pause, Samuel answered, "Possibly, but they'll be cautious after the car incident. If you take reasonable precautions, avoid secluded places, you should be safe." "Should I assign some men to watch over you?" he asked. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "No, it's too risky. Foster's associates might catch on. I'll look after myself." "All right. Just check in on Thursday," Samuel suggested. "Yeah, will do." "Thanks," I replied, my voice betraying none of the unease I felt. As I hung up, I took a deep breath. Wednesday was one of the most dismal days of my life. The reality of my crumbling marriage, coupled with the betrayal of my best friend, was a weight I couldn't shake. Sophia and Foster's involvement in the conspiracy against me gnawed at me constantly. It was impossible not to feel the creeping sense that one or both of them were orchestrating my downfall. I spent the day in the office, feigning productivity, engaging in sporadic conversations with Emily, but my mind kept returning to thoughts of vengeance. My plans were still in their infancy, but the broad strokes were already forming. Each piece of new information from Samuel only fueled my growing indignation and determination. On Thursday, I delayed my call to Hayes, giving his team more time to dig into the case. By 4 p.m., I decided to break from the office and get a haircut, a small escape from the building tension. I followed it up with a visit to a diner, where I settled into a booth with a cup of coffee and dialed Samuel's number. Our conversation lasted nearly an hour. We went over queries, clarified details, and strategized next steps. By the time the call ended, I had the information I needed. I could press forward. That evening, I maintained my usual facade at home. Sophia greeted me with affection, and I returned it just as expected. We shared dinner, Rose's fried chicken, which I had to admit I'd grown fond of, and watched a movie, but I couldn't shake the feeling that our physical connection was nearing its end. The emotional connection, perhaps even our entire relationship, was already starting to fray. I felt it deep in my bones. Friday came, and I wasted no time. I left early, hoping to avoid a confrontation with Sophia. After a quick breakfast, I grabbed her BMW convertible, intending to take a safer route to the office. Sophia would likely be irritated when she realized her car was missing, but by the end of the day, it would be the least of her concerns. At 9 a.m., Emily arrived, and I called her into my office. I handed her a list of tasks. "I'll need to adjust my schedule today. Could you take care of this for me?" Her eyes widened as she scanned the list, clearly expecting an explanation, but I offered nothing. I simply watched her as she nodded and promised to handle it. The morning passed without incident, except for a meeting with Isabel Harris, a PR consultant I'd known for years. Isabel was an attractive woman in her late 30s, witty and sharp, a longtime associate of Apex. We had an hour-long discussion in my office, and I made sure the radio was playing in the background to mask our conversation. At lunch, I ate at my desk, my thoughts focused on the events that were about to unfold. Around 1 p.m., Emily informed me that Liam Foster was trying to reach me urgently. I instructed her to tell him I couldn't meet until 4 p.m., as previously arranged. I couldn't help but wonder if Foster had bugged my office, maybe overhearing my conversation with Isabel. The thought gave me a sense of satisfaction. Let him stew in frustration. At 12:55, I entered the conference room, which was set up precisely as I'd requested. Arthur Wintner, the technician, was there, ready to demonstrate the new surveillance system I'd ordered. "Hello, Arthur. Everything set up?" I asked. "Yes, Mr. McMillan. All ready. Do you want a quick demo, or should I just start the system?" "Just show me," I replied, gesturing to the equipment. "I want it running for all my meetings today." Arthur set it up and tested it briefly, confirming that the cartridge would last 6 hours, more than enough for my purposes. I thanked him, and he left. Minutes later, Ryan Taylor arrived. He hesitated at the door, looking uncomfortable. "Ryan, come in. You're fine with recording, right?" I said, motioning for him to sit. He looked puzzled. "James, what's going on? Did Emily explain?" "This stays between us," I said, keeping my tone neutral. He nodded, though unease still radiated from him. "Yeah, sure." I reclined in my chair, maintaining a calm, impassive expression as I studied him. Then, without warning, I confronted him. "Ryan, I know about you and my wife." His face tightened, and he struggled to maintain composure, avoiding my gaze. "James, I don't know what you're talking about." "No need to pretend," I said coldly, tapping a thick manila folder on the desk. "I've got the evidence. But now, I want the truth." Ryan squirmed in his chair. I let the silence hang for a moment before I added, "You're in deep trouble, and lying will only make it worse." Ryan looked absolutely miserable, but I wasn't about to let him off the hook. After a pause, he spoke. his voice barely above a whisper. James, can we turn the camera off? No, keep going, Ryan, I said, my voice steady. I'm listening. I leaned forward slightly, keeping my eyes fixed on him. When did it start? How? And how could you justify having an affair with the boss's wife? Ryan hesitated, his gaze fixed on the table in front of him. It started about 4 years ago, he said, voice tight. Lasted 3 months. Sophia seduced me. It's that simple, Ryan said, his voice strained. His shoulders were slumped, as if the weight of this truth had been hanging over him for years. Olivia and I knew you both for a long time. Sophia always flirted with me. Who wouldn't? Then, at a Christmas party, it got intense. She was all over me. At first, I didn't take it seriously. But then she called me when you were away. She asked me to come over. He paused, visibly uncomfortable. I tried to leave, but she insisted. Locked the door. Told me she wanted me. I knew it was wrong, but I stayed. She led me to the bedroom, and we spent 2 hours together. Ryan's voice dropped, and he stared at the floor. He looked broken, as if admitting the truth was a relief, but also a deeper betrayal. How long did it last? And how did it end? I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the rage simmering beneath. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. It lasted a few months. It started as just an affair, but then she started talking about something else, money. She wanted me to help her embezzle from Apex. At first, I thought she was joking, but then she kept asking me about the company's accounts, about how to create fake ones. She was obsessed with it. She thought you had millions, and she wanted to share for herself. I leaned forward, my anger growing. And what did you say? Ryan shifted again, looking guilty. I told her I wouldn't do it. I wasn't willing to risk my job, my freedom. But honestly, I didn't refuse because I cared about you or Apex. By that point, I was so deep into the affair. I would have done anything to stay with her, but I couldn't figure out how to help her without getting caught. When she realized I wouldn't go along with it, she ended it. He sighed, shaking his head. She wasn't kind about it. Just shut me out. It happened before Olivia could find out, though. I lied to her, denied everything. It was just work stuff. She probably didn't fully believe me, but she let it go. I worked to make it up to her, and we're still together now. The weight of Ryan's confession sat heavily in the air. I didn't know whether to feel rage or a sick sense of satisfaction. Sophia had betrayed me in ways I never could have imagined. The affair wasn't enough. She had sought to embezzle from the company I built. See you Monday, I said flatly, dismissing Ryan. He nodded, his face filled with both fear and relief, before leaving. Later, I spoke with Derek Hughes, my second-in-command in operations. Derek had been with Apex for years, and I always thought of him as one of the good ones. Derek, did Sophia come to you with anything? I asked directly. Yeah, she did, Derek replied, shifting uncomfortably. It was a few months after she and Ryan broke up. She came to me. At first, it was a joke, but then it got serious. She started asking if I could help her embezzle from Apex, creating fake accounts, funneling money. She thought it would be easy. Did you help her? I pressed. No, Derek said firmly. I told her it was impossible. The company's financial controls are too tight. I wasn't willing to risk my career or my freedom for her. When I told her no, she stopped pushing it. But after that, I just cut ties with her. I didn't want anything to do with it. I absorbed Derek's words, grateful for his honesty. He had refused her advances, but still, I couldn't help but wonder what else she had tried. How many people had Sophia tried to manipulate into helping her with her schemes? I called Harrison Cole, Apex's treasurer, next. His reaction was one of surprise. When I confronted him with pictures of Sophia, he denied everything. James, I don't know what you're implying, but you should talk to Sophia about this, Harrison said, shaking his head. She made a move on me once, but I refused. She didn't push me after that. I showed him the pictures, trying to gauge his reaction. Still, he denied everything. She invited me to a surprise party. She made advances. I turned her down. I didn't think it was worth bringing up before, but now I understand why you're asking. I believe you, I said, my voice softening. I'm not accusing you. I just need the truth. And now I know I can trust you. After Bernie left, I sat alone, processing the flood of revelations. The affair was one thing, but the deeper betrayal, her scheming to rob the company I built, was harder to stomach. Emily then informed me that Liam Foster was trying to reach me urgently. I had a scheduled meeting with him at 4 p.m., but he insisted on coming earlier. I told Emily to give me 5 minutes before letting him in. When Liam entered, he was visibly shaken, as if he'd downed a dozen cups of coffee in a panic. He tried to remain casual, but his eyes betrayed his nerves. "Hey, James. What's going on?" he asked, his voice tight. "Hey, Fozzie. Thanks for coming by. Want some coffee?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. He declined, his eyes flicking to the video camera in the room. "What's with the camera?" I smiled. "It's for recording today's meetings." He seemed apprehensive, but didn't object. I turned my laptop toward him, revealing a still frame from a video, one that showed him and Sophia in a compromising position. The color drained from his face as he recognized the image. Before he could say anything, I swung my fist, hitting him square under his eye. He staggered back, crashing to the floor as his chair toppled. I stood over him, watching as he slowly regained his bearings. The pain in my hand was nothing compared to the relief I felt from finally confronting him. His wide, horrified eyes locked onto mine as I stepped back. He wasn't going to get away with this. Not now. Not after everything Sophia and he had done. It took Liam Foster a while to regain his senses. When he finally opened his eyes, he looked around warily before pulling away from me. His expression was a mix of confusion and caution. "Think you can handle more?" I quipped, my tone casual. "No need, James," he muttered, eyeing the door like he was considering escape. "Forget it, Fozzie. Guards are outside. You're staying put," I said flatly. We sat in tense silence as he likely tried to assess what I knew, hoping I was unaware of his full involvement. "Get back to the table. What's coming next will hurt a lot worse," I ordered. He complied, his gaze locked on mine. "You're a disgrace," I continued, the words coming out sharp and biting. "Entertaining my wife, stealing from me, and plotting my death." His face twisted in shock. "James, it's not like that." Sophia confessed it all. I cut him off, lying with practiced ease. "You thought eliminating me would complete the betrayal, didn't you?" "No, that's not true." His desperation was palpable now. "I admit the affair with Sophia, but everything else was her idea. She pushed me. I tried to talk her out of it, but I eventually went along. She initiated everything." Foster sank into his chair, defeated. He confessed how Sophia had seduced him, then began plotting to steal money from the company. Unlike others, Foster had followed through, embezzling $1.8 million over 7 months. "She wanted more," he said, his voice strained. "$1 million or $2 million wasn't enough. It wasn't fair. I closed the accounts and covered my tracks. Then she talked about killing me. She wanted us to be together, to enjoy your money." His eyes flickered with guilt. "She kept pushing it every time we met, describing our life once you were gone. And you believed her?" Foster sighed, defeated. "I was a fool, James. I convinced myself she loved me. But then she started hinting that if I didn't do what she wanted, we wouldn't be together. I felt trapped." "She's a cold-blooded monster," I muttered. "Once she got that idea in her head, there was no letting go. So, I found someone to tamper with your brake line. I thought it could be done without suspicion." Foster's voice cracked. "I know you'll never forgive me. How could you? But I can't believe I did it. It's like I wasn't even myself. Like Sophia was controlling me. I followed her orders like a puppet. I didn't need to ask if he'd try again." Hayes's video had already made that clear. She wanted it to happen, and I couldn't stop her. I persuaded her to wait, but she kept pushing. I couldn't break free. He confessed everything, including the offshore accounts where the stolen money was hidden, except for the $60,000 Sophia had already spent. At 4:30 p.m., I handed him over to the guards. I returned to the conference room, waiting for Sophia's arrival at 5. Each new revelation weighed heavier on me. My wife wasn't just unfaithful and stealing. She had been planning to ruin me completely. How could I have been so blind after 8 years together? At exactly 5 o'clock, Sophia entered the room, fashionably late as always. She looked glamorous, but there was a flicker of irritation behind her polished exterior. Sweetheart, what's all this about? Emily practically dragged me here, but she hasn't told me a thing. Is there some drama at the company? And why did you leave me stranded without a car this morning? I watched her closely. Her faux annoyance masked genuine concern. She and Foster had likely been communicating all day, trying to figure out what I knew. Darling, please sit down. This isn't easy for me, I said, feigning emotional struggle. I savored every moment of the game I was playing. She hesitated, her knee bouncing nervously under the table. I could see her preparing for the worst. Sophia, I know about your infidelity, I said, my voice controlled, but the anger simmering just beneath the surface. How could you betray me like this? I believed you loved me. Her eyes widened in panic before she quickly masked it with a mixture of sadness and empathy. Impressive, but expected, she said, her voice trembling. Sweetie, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. It's just, you were often away and She trailed off, tears starting to well up in her eyes. I could tell she was trying to manipulate me, but I wasn't buying it. I leaned forward. You were lonely? Really? After all this time? Sophia, you didn't think I might be lonely too? But I still believed in us. Tears ran down her face as she reached for my hand. James, please, can you forgive me? I can't bear to lose you. I paused, pretending to wrestle with the decision. I don't know, Sophia. I just don't know. Tell me everything. When did it start? How did it unfold? And why? Above all, why did you do it? She hesitated, clearly unsure of which lover I knew about. By framing the affair in the past tense, I left her uncertain, perhaps confessing to something I hadn't even discovered yet. She finally broke, her voice quiet. It started when you were away so much. I felt neglected. I know it's unfair. You've worked so hard for us, but I succumbed to his advances. I couldn't help but chuckle inwardly. A valiant effort, Sophia, but you're not off the hook yet. When was this, Sophia? I need specifics, I demanded, pressing her further. Abruptly, she rose, attempting to embrace me, tears welling in her eyes. James, I'm so sorry. I held her at arm's length. When, Sophia? She sighed, mentally calculating her response. A little over 4 years ago. With Ryan Taylor, she admitted. I smirked to myself. Nice try, Sophia. Too bad there's no right answer here. Her facade of sadness cracked as irritation seeped through. She settled back into the chair. It lasted months, James. I don't know why. I lost control. Eventually, I ended it with Ryan. It was tearing me apart. I cut her off, my voice rising. Ryan? You were unfaithful with Ryan, too? The panic in her eyes was immediate. I don't understand, baby. Derek Hughes wasn't the only one, I snapped. You slept with 2 of my employees. What were you thinking? She tried to speak, but my anger overpowered her. How do we fix this, Sophia? How can I trust you again? Everyone at Apex must be laughing at me behind my back. The boss's wife is sleeping with the employees. Who else have you been involved with? The janitor? No, baby, just those 2, she swore, her voice strained. I glared at her. How can I believe that? You've been with everyone I know. Ethan, Blake, Archie, Peter, Fozzie. How am I supposed to trust you? Sophia seized the opportunity, rising and grabbing my hands. James, it was only those 2. It was years ago. I've been faithful since, and I'll be forever. I stared at her, masking my fury with sadness. Okay, Sophia, you cheated, but now you're faithful? Right. Her eyes softened with hope. Yes, baby. I swear. I pushed the laptop toward her. There's one more thing. Can you tell me what? She looked at the screen, her face falling as the video of her with Liam Foster played. His head was between her thighs, her moans filling the room. She didn't recoil. No scream. Instead, she let out a choked sound, followed by a tense pause. Then, she shut the laptop and turned to face me, her face transforming from shock to anger. Okay, James, you caught me. Congratulations. What do you want me to admit? Yes, I had fun with Fozzie. He was better than you could ever be. I was momentarily rattled. Really, Sophia? Is that why you tried to ruin me? Her face froze, and she stared at me, confused. What? I don't know what you're talking about. Is that so? I murmured, opening the laptop again. This time, I showed her the video of her and Foster in our kitchen, sitting in bathrobes, planning my murder. I don't care, Fozzie, she said in the video. If the car didn't crash, we'll try again. We need to destroy it differently. Can't we poison it? I paused the video and grinned. You're going to have a hard time denying this in court, darling. Sophia's face twisted with contempt. She leaned back in her chair, a smug look crossing her face. You won't dare go to the police, James. You'd be a laughingstock. So would Apex, the head of a billion-dollar company, his wife sleeping with the employees. You'd be a worldwide joke. I didn't react. I dialed Emily, requesting Isabel Harris's presence. When she arrived, she immediately sized up the situation, glaring at Sophia. Isabel, my dear wife, believes it would be detrimental to arrest her for grand larceny and attempted homicide, I said. Isabel grinned, clearly enjoying the moment. Absolutely, James. This saga will dominate the headlines. Money, infidelity, attempted homicide, betrayal, all wrapped up in a stunning woman. It'll be bigger than Paris Hilton or Nicole Smith. Apex will gain more publicity than you could ever buy in ads. $500 million worth. You'll be everywhere. Larry King, The Today Show, you name it. A virtuous businessman deceived by his conniving wife and her puppet. She paused, savoring the words. And after the trial, Businessweek, The Wall Street Journal, Entrepreneur of the Year. Apex will rake in $100 million in new business. You'll get thousands of letters from women wanting to be the next Mrs. McMillan. It's a PR goldmine. Isabel winked at me before exiting the room. Sophia sat back in her chair, her smugness slipping away, her face draining of color. For the first time, she seemed truly beaten. I dialed Emily again. Call the cops. It's over. The next 14 months brought their own drama. The police slapped Sophia and Foster with charges of attempted homicide, conspiracy, fraud, grand larceny, and more. Apex's legal team quickly filed a civil case to reclaim the embezzled funds, all thanks to Foster's confession. Meanwhile, I initiated divorce proceedings on grounds of infidelity. Thankfully, due to the legal actions, all of Foster and Sophia's accounts linked to mine were frozen. By the time they were out on bail, they couldn't afford high-priced attorneys and were stuck with public defenders. It wasn't a pleasant experience. After Sophia's betrayal was revealed, I wasted no time. I ousted her from the house and filed for a restraining order. The video of her and Foster discussing a second attempt on my life was irrefutable evidence. She had no option but to face the consequences. Susan, one of Sophia's tennis buddies, offered her temporary refuge in a guest house. Sophia didn't reach out to me, and I didn't expect her to. She knew there was nothing left to say. The Monday after everything came to light, I summoned Ryan and Derek to my office. Both men seemed unsurprised. Derek, always practical, simply asked that if a potential employer contacted me for a reference, I'd vouch for his solid work at Apex. I agreed without hesitation. Derek wasn't the mastermind of any of this, and I respected his professionalism. Ryan, however, tried to broker a deal. Help me land a job, and I'll testify against Sophia, he suggested. I chuckled and showed him the door. I reminded him I already had his admission of infidelity and Sophia's coercion on tape. If he refused to testify, the prosecution would subpoena him. I appointed Bernie Cole as Ryan's CFO. Bernie was competent and trusted, and I had no doubt he'd be able to stabilize things at Apex. Bernie also took on the task of finding replacements for both Ryan and Derek, ensuring the company could keep moving forward. 7 months later, Sophia and Foster's trial began. It was a media circus, spanning nearly 3 weeks. I only attended a few sessions. The defense tried every angle they could, with each side blaming the other. Sophia's charm worked wonders on the male jurors, but it wasn't enough to overcome the video evidence. That video, showing Sophia urging Foster to try again, sealed their fate. Both were convicted on multiple charges, including attempted homicide. During the trial, Sophia used the media frenzy to her advantage, securing interviews and magazine contracts that allowed her to hire a high-priced lawyer. Her legal team filed multiple appeals, but it was all in vain. The evidence was irrefutable. She and Foster were looking at 10 to 15 years behind bars. The embezzled funds, except for $72,000, were returned to Apex. I made sure every penny stolen from the company was recovered, and I was ready to move on. With Foster gone, I needed to find someone to fill his role. On a trip to Los Angeles, I met Samuel Hayes, who suggested I hire Lucas Carls, someone he knew was keen to relocate to the Bay Area. After reviewing his credentials, I made an offer. Lucas accepted, and he quickly proved to be a strong addition to the team. But Samuel had another surprise for me. He invited me to his office to show me something. "I think you'll find this interesting," he said. The footage was unexpected. Sophia in bed with my attorney, Thomas Bennett. Despite Thomas being nearly 60, Sophia had seduced him to find loopholes in our prenup. Thomas, who had drafted the prenup himself, hadn't found anything significant, but he still attempted to exploit Sophia's offer. I wasted no time confronting Thomas. I exposed his unethical conduct, and the California Board of Legal Ethics had no choice but to disbar him. I also sued him and recovered around $240,000, which I donated to charity. The satisfaction of seeing his career crumble was a small but well-deserved justice. In the months following Sophia's downfall, Apex's media exposure soared. Isabel Harris, my PR consultant, was spot on with her predictions. I was featured in Fortune magazine, appeared on CNN, and graced the cover of the National Enquirer. Isabel hired 3 more staff members just to manage the constant stream of media requests. Over the next 6 months, Apex's business grew by 20%. The company was stronger than ever. As Isabel had predicted, the media frenzy also brought in a flood of letters from women. Over 8,000 letters arrived, many of them accompanied by suggestive photos. I passed the task of sorting through them to an intern who seemed to enjoy the attention more than I did. Honestly, though, I wasn't as interested as I'd expected to be. Sophia had once fulfilled my every desire, but now I found myself reconsidering my past lifestyle. I went on a few dates with women I found attractive, but it didn't take long to realize I wasn't looking for anything casual. I wasn't interested in fleeting connections. It was during this time that I realized I had been spending a lot of time with Isabel. Our professional relationship evolved into something deeper. I was drawn to her intelligence, her humor, and her unwavering support. We've been dating for almost a year now, and while neither of us is rushing into anything, marriage has been discussed in passing. I'm not sure when it will happen, but it feels like a natural progression. For my birthday, Isabel surprised me with a special gift. We spent the evening at her place, watching an old Humphrey Bogart movie. The next morning, she brought me breakfast in bed on a large tray. When I woke up, she was standing there in her robe, holding the tray with a smile. After we ate, she teased, "Is your present ready?" "I'm actually wearing it under my robe." Curious, I raised my eyebrows. She pulled back the robe to reveal a white t-shirt with a scanned image of a smiling Sophia, taken from a photo at my house. Beneath the image were the bold words, "I survived a monster." I couldn't help but laugh, pulling Isabel close. "Come here, you."